Okay, class, day 2 of algebra. We're going to look at section 1, 2 in our books, and we're dealing with grouping symbols today. Now, if you notice up here, the first thing that Mrs. Burton wrote on her slide was the definition for grouping symbols. Now, I don't think you really need to write that down in your notebooks, but I think you need to know what it is, and I think it should be familiar from Math Pass. So let's kind of look through this definition. We know a grouping symbol is a device that we're going to use like a pair of parentheses. Okay, and we're going to see that that's used to enclose an expression, and it shows us that we should be, that part of the math sentence should be simplified first. So whenever I see parentheses and it's got some math in it to do, like it's got numbers and operators, then that's signaling, hey, 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 do me first. And that's an important thing to see. Now, the other thing we've got to kind of realize as we go through here then is multiplication symbols are often left out of expressions with grouping symbols. Now, a lot of times, like we don't use 6 times 3 very much anymore in algebra. Why? Yeah, that multiplication symbol, that x, looks a lot like a variable expression x, and so we don't be confused like that. So we don't really use multiplication symbols. Now, let's look up here at my examples. When we look at our grouping symbols, if you notice, Mrs. Burton kind of gave you 3 examples. Parentheses. Now, you and I have seen parentheses before, but as soon as you see this math problem and you see that you've got numbers and operators inside those parentheses, that's saying, hey, 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 do me first. So let's do that. We know that 5 plus 2 is 7, and so now we have 6 times 7, which equals 42. Now, the second type of grouping symbols I showed you is brackets. Now, those may not be as familiar, but they just, brackets look like that. And if we have some math numbers and operators inside brackets, we do that first. And then the third type that I showed you were braces. Okay, some students say, Ms. Burton, I can't draw that little squiggly thing, but I think you can if you try. But if you see parentheses, brackets, or braces, and there's numbers with operators in there, remember addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, that's a signal, hey, you do me first. Now, another thing we're going to see that we may not be familiar with from before is a fraction bar is also considered a grouping symbol. So if you look at my example over here, well, basically, in order for me to do this correctly, there's really 3 parts. The first thing we need to do is we need to take care of the math that's in the numerator. Whoops. Okay? So if we, my little circle didn't work there. That's bothering me. Okay? So we need to take care of the math in the numerator. And so I look at that and I say, okay, 12 plus 4, I can do that. That's 16. The second part that we need to do is we need to take care of the math that's in the denominator. Okay, so 15 minus 7, 15 minus 7 is 8. And then the last thing we're going to do, well, you and I learned that fraction bar means division. So the last thing we're going to do is take care of division. So 16 divided by 8 equals 2. Great job. Now, there's some things we need to look at and kind of remind ourselves from last year. Oops, sorry, went the wrong way. Okay, now here is to realize sometimes there's no operators in the grouping symbol. So remember, when there's no grouping symbols, we've got to follow our order of operation. Do you remember our acronym last year for order of operation? Who remembers? Good job. Remember PEMDAS? Yeah. So the first thing we're going to try to do is we're going to try to do parentheses. That's what we're going to do first. Okay? Well, right now, we're not going to worry about exponents because we haven't talked about them yet. But after we take care of the parentheses, do all multiplication and division from left to right. And then the last thing we're going to do, all right, is addition and subtraction from left to right. That left to right rule is real important, okay, that we follow it. So that'll work to our favor. So let's look at a couple of examples here. If you look at number 1, now, big idea. Big idea. When we're dealing with these parentheses, these grouping symbols, and we have parentheses around something and it's got numbers and operators in it, hey, do me first, we've got to recognize, it's important that we recognize those parentheses. What are we trying to recognize? Well, we need to know who's in the parenthesis and who's out of the parenthesis. So let's look at my top equation for number 1. So really, location of parentheses is important. When I look at this first problem on number 1, I look there, oh, we got parentheses. And those parentheses have numbers and operators in them. Hey, do me first. So that's what I'm going to do. What is 5 minus 3? Well, everybody knows that's 2. And then 12 times 2 is 24. But look at the bottom equation. Did you notice I got parentheses there, but there's no operators in there. Usually if we see numbers written like this, that means multiplication. So go back up here. If there's no grouping symbols, we're going to multiply first. So I'm going to look there and I'm going to say, okay, 12 times 5 is 60 minus 3. I took care of all the multiplication and division. So now the last thing I'm going to do, 60 minus 3 is 57. So do you understand the difference? Good job. Who's in the parenthesis and who's out of the parenthesis. Let's look at my number 2. If we look at the top equation, number 2, what should we do first? Well, I've got this 4 times 5. I need to do that first. So we're going to have 6 plus 20. And we took care of all the multiplication. So the last thing we do is add and subtract. So we know that's going to be 26. Look at my last equation up here. I've got parentheses, but this time there's numbers and operators in there. I can do the math that's inside. So when I look there, I know that 6 plus 4 is 10. And then when these two guys are written beside each other, that means multiply. So 10 times 5 is 50. So I did all those problems because I wanted you to see and recognize those parentheses, who's inside them when we've got math and numbers and operators and multiplication. Ooh, Mrs. Burton threw another fraction bar in. What should we do first? Yeah, remember we said we're going to take care of what's ever in the numerator. Oh, but I got a grouping symbol in the numerator. So that means we're going to go here first. So what is 13 minus 3? So that means we've got 6 times 10, which equals 60. Let's look at our denominator. Oh, no grouping symbols down there. What should we do first? That's right, we're going to take care of multiplication first. So I know 2 times 5 is 10. And then 10 plus 2 is 12. Remember, the very last thing we're going to do, that fraction bar means division. So when I look here then, 60 divided by 12 is 5. Great job. Okay, let's practice a few more together. So go ahead and write these problems down in your notebook. Okay, we'll do them one at a time. So let's start with number 1. What should we do first? Simplify each expression. What should we do first? Did you see my parentheses? Hey, do me first. So that's where we're going to go. We've got math operators in there, so we know that 8 plus 3 is 11, and then 5 times 11 is 55. Good job. Look at number 2. What should we do first? Well, there's not really math, numbers, and operators in my parentheses. But when these two guys are written beside each other, I do multiplication first. So we know 8 times 5 is 40, and 40 plus 3 is 43. Good job. All right, let's look at number 3, fraction bar. What are we going to do first? That's right, the numerator. 10 plus 6 is 16. And then we're going to take care of the denominator. 10 minus 2 is 8. Remember, last thing we do is division. That fraction bar means divide. 16 divided by 8 is 2. Miss Burton, be a little tricky here on number 4. What do you notice in number 4 that's a little bit different? Yes, we have two different grouping symbols. We have parentheses, and then we have braces as well. Okay, so what do we do if we have more than one grouping symbol? Good job. From Math Pass, we realize, hey, we're going to start at the inside and work our way out. So if I'm looking at number 4 up here, inside is the parentheses. So we're going to do that first. 8 minus 3 is 5. And so now that we took care of the parentheses, now we're doing the math in the braces. So what is 10 divided by 5? And everybody knows that is 2. So what's left? 10 minus 2 equals 8. Great job. Now, yesterday, on day 1 of algebra, we talked about the idea of the substitution property. Remember, we learned what variables were yesterday. They're letters that have numbers that stand for them. And so sometimes they're going to want me to evaluate the expression. They're going to tell me that x equals 4 and y equals 3. And so we substitute those values in, and then we do the math following our order of operation. Now, Mrs. Burton likes to call that S&E, substitute and evaluate. So let's look at our first problem over here on this side of the board. I need to plug in a 4 for x and a 3 for y. So let's do that. We've got 4 plus 4 in the first parenthesis, and if I plug y in the back parenthesis, we have 3 minus 1. What should we do next? Yeah, hey, parentheses, do me first. So we're going to realize here the first parenthesis, 4 plus 4 is 8. The back parenthesis is 3 minus 1, which is 2. And now, if these two guys, if 8 is written right beside 2, what operation are we doing? Yeah, we're multiplying. 8 times 2 is 16. Good job. All right, let's try problem number 2. We've got to substitute in our values for x and y, and then we're going to evaluate. Evaluate just means do the math. So we've got 9 times x. We know x is 4. That's going to be given, minus x times y, 4 times 3. Okay? All right, what should we do first? Hey. Oh, that's right. We're going to take no grouping symbols, really, again, grouping symbols, I mean somebody that's got operators in there. So we got to multiply first. We're going to get 9 times 4 is 36. We've got to multiply here. Remember, addition and subtraction come last. 4 times 3 is 12. And now 36 minus 12 is 24. Nicely done. Okay, last problem. Number 3, substitute and evaluate. Well, x is 4, y is 3 minus 5. And then on the bottom, we've got x plus y. So now that we've substituted, now we evaluate. Let's look at our numerator. What should we do first there? Right, multiplication's always first. So 4 times 3 is 12 minus 5. And then I know 12 minus 5 is 7. Let's look in our denominator. What's 4 plus 3? 7. So now we've got 7 over 7. Remember, the last thing we do is divide. So we have 7 divided by 7 is 1. Great job today. Now, here's what I need you to make sure you pay attention to tonight as you do your homework. Watch out for those parentheses. Please recognize who's in the parentheses and who's out of the parentheses, and make sure you realize what to do first. Parentheses first, then multiplication, division, lastly addition and subtraction, and don't forget the left-right rule. So let's go ahead and start on homework.